In the dead of night on September 26, 1983, deep inside a secret Soviet military bunker, an alarm suddenly shattered the silence. Red lights bulged across the control panels.
Sirens wailed. On the main screen, the unthinkable was happening. 5 American nuclear missiles were screaming through the atmosphere, heading straight for the heart of the Soviet Union. If this was real, they had mere minutes to launch a full-scale nuclear retaliation.
The fate of the world rested on the decision made in that room. But one man, a single officer on duty, made a choice that defied every rule, every order, and all the paranoia of the Cold War.
He chose not to strike back.
And in doing so, he single-handedly saved the world from nuclear annihilation.
This is the story of Stanislav Petrov, the man you've probably never heard of, and the night he prevented World War III. So, who was this man?
Stanislav Petrov wasn't a high-ranking general or a powerful politician.
He was a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Defense Forces, a duty officer whose job was to watch the screens.
Specifically, he monitored the brand new OK or early warning satellite system, a technological marvel designed to give the USSR its first ever real-time glimpse of an American missile launch. On paper, his duty was brutally simple. Follow the protocol. If the system detects incoming missiles, you report it up the chain of command, and the process for a massive counterstrike begins.
But on this particular night, following protocol meant pushing the button that would have started a global nuclear holocaust.
To understand the pressure he was under, you have to remember what 1983 was like.
This was not a time of peace and diplomacy.
The Cold War was at its absolute freezing point. Just 3 weeks earlier, the Soviets had shot down a civilian airliner, Korean Airlines Flight 007, killing all 269 people on board, including a U.S.N.
congressman.
The world was outraged. U.S.N.
President Ronald Reagan had recently labeled the Soviet Union an evil empire and was running massive, aggressive military exercises right on Europe's doorstep. Both superpowers were armed to the teeth, deeply paranoid, and itching for a fight.
The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife.
In fact, the Soviet leadership was so convinced a surprise attack was coming that they had a secret intelligence program called Operation Ryan. Its entire purpose was to look for signs that the West was about to launch a first strike.
In their minds, a nuclear attack wasn't a question of if, but when.
The entire Soviet military machine was primed for the worst-case scenario, and on that September night, the worst-case scenario seemed to have arrived.
Back in that underground bunker, the OKU satellite system was going crazy. First, it registered one missile launch from a U.S.N.
base.
Then, just moments later, 4 more appeared.
The system's status flashed to the highest level of certainty. Launch, the computers, the satellites, the entire multi-billion global defense network was screaming that a nuclear attack was underway. Every eye in that cramped command center turned to Petrov. His job was to confirm the threat. If he gave the green light, the report would be instantly transmitted to the Soviet General Staff and then to the top leadership. From there, the decision to retaliate would be almost automatic. Within minutes, hundreds, if not thousands, of Soviet nuclear warheads would be unleashed on the United States, Europe, and their allies. This was it, the moment everyone had feared for decades.
The system said the war had begun. Petrov had only seconds to make a decision that would affect every human being on the planet. He was trained to trust the system.
It was designed by the nation's best scientists, monitored with cutting-edge hardware, and had been checked and rechecked countless times.
Doubting it was like doubting gravity.
But something felt wrong. A gut instinct, a nagging feeling he couldn't shake. He stared at the screen and thought, why would the United States launch only 5 missiles?
It made no strategic sense. A first strike wasn't a warning shot. It was an all-out, overwhelming assault designed to cripple your enemy before they could even react.
If America was really attacking, they would launch hundreds of missiles at once, not just a handful. He checked his other monitors. The ground-based radar systems, the second layer of defense, were showing nothing, just empty skies. The only source for this terrifying information was the satellite. It was the system versus his intuition, his training versus his logic. With his superiors on the phone demanding an answer, Petrov made the call. He picked up the receiver and, with a steady voice, reported it as a false alarm. He told his commanders that the system was malfunctioning. He logged the event as a computer error, and then he waited. The minutes that followed must have been the longest of his life. If he was wrong, Soviet cities would soon be engulfed in nuclear fire, and it would be his fault. But nothing happened. No explosions lit up the horizon. No second wave of missiles appeared. The silence in the bunker was absolute. He had been right.
The world was safe.
So what actually happened? Later investigations revealed a bizarre and almost unbelievable cause.
The Okeanos satellite hadn't seen missiles at all.
It had been tricked by a rare atmospheric phenomenon. Sunlight reflecting off the tops of high-altitude clouds at just the right angle to mimic the heat signature of a rocket engine. It was a 1 in a billion alignment of sun, clouds, and satellite orbit that created the perfect storm of false positives. The technology wasn't necessarily broken, but it wasn't perfect. And on that night, the nuance of human instinct proved superior to the cold, hard logic of a machine. You'd think the man who saved the world would be hailed as a hero, right?
Given a medal?
A parade? Not exactly.
In fact, Petrov was officially reprimanded.
Why? For failing to correctly document the event in his logbook. His superiors were more concerned with the paperwork than the fact he'd prevented Armageddon.
His heroic act of defiance was classified, buried deep within the archives of the Soviet military, and completely hidden from the public.
For over a decade, the world had no idea how close it had come, or who to thank for its survival.
The truth didn't emerge until the late 1990s, long after the Soviet Union had collapsed and the Cold War was a memory. By then, the man who saved the world was a forgotten pensioner living a quiet life. Finally, in 2006, the world began to recognize his courage.
Petrov was presented with the World Citizen Award at the United Nations.
A powerful documentary was made about him, fittingly titled The Man Who Saved the World. But even with this recognition, his name remains largely unknown to the public. Stanislav Petrov passed away quietly in a Moscow suburb in 2017, a humble man who had carried the fate of humanity on his shoulders for a few terrifying minutes and chose peace.
We often think of nuclear war as an abstract threat, a plot for a movie. But the story of Stanislav Petrov is a chilling reminder that on September 26, 1983, it was just moments away from becoming our reality. All it took was a strange reflection in the sky, a flawed computer system, and one man who had the courage to trust his gut and disobey his orders.
Stanislav Petrov didn't wear a cape or have superpowers.
But for one terrifying night, he was the most important person on Earth.
His story is a powerful lesson about the thin line between technology and human judgment, and how close we came to the end. If you find these forgotten moments of history as fascinating as we do, make sure to subscribe to our channel.
We dig up the stories that were almost lost to time, the near misses and buried truths that shaped our world. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.